Three, two, one, here we go. Rainman's Take podcast. Observations on the world we live in. My take on current events and other topics of interest. Also, interviews with some really cool people. So let's get the conversation going. Hey, everybody, it's the Rain Man. I wanted to do another raindrop, this time about the establishment's reaction to states wanting to reopen their economies in spite of COVID. I wanted to bring this to your attention because my take is that there is a narrative at play that's designed to create fear, frustration, and confusion, which is exactly what the establishment wants and needs. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail here. That is a well-known propaganda tool. When people are scared and confused, they are more willing to accept more authoritarian rules. History is full of examples of this, and the most recent one in the United States is post 9/11, when there was an almost unanimous passing of the Patriot Act. Now, despite its great name, that one act ushered in the beginning of the surveillance and police state that has become so prevalent in our society, among other regulations that restrict our freedoms. Also notice that this negative pushback is only coming from one side of the aisle, and that the pandemic in general and the mask mandate in particular has become a completely politicized issue. So why is this happening? Let's look at the reaction of the states opening up. And from Texas to Connecticut are looking to remove the mask mandate and are lifting restrictions to fully open up their economies. And the reaction from the left has been completely over the top, in my view. From President Biden calling these ideas Neanderthal thinking from these states, to Fauci in a recent interview where he looked very frustrated and almost hurt that these states were no longer listening to his calls for continued mask wearing and lockdowns throughout 2021, calling it inexplicable that these states would do that. And then, of course, you have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and other Democratic politicians weighing in with comments like the GOP wants to kill their constituents, etc. The hyperbolic comments just have not stopped. Except, according to Texas Governor Abbott, their data is moving in the right direction, and he wants to get back to normal as quickly as he can. And by the way, all he's saying is that the masks are no longer mandatory, and businesses can still recommend them if they want. He wants all businesses that want to open up with no restrictions, and yet the comments and the negative pushback continues. I do find it interesting that the establishment no longer talks about Florida, because Governor Ron DeSantis didn't listen initially, and really they've been doing relatively fine. The establishment, however, did talk a lot about Florida in the beginning, and if you remember, this was early on, probably March or April of the pandemic last year, when Chris Cuomo from CNN tweeted out essentially questioning whether or not DeSantis was lying about the numbers that were coming out of Florida. And I find this pretty ironic, given the fact that it now appears that Chris's brother, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, is actually cooking the books on the numbers of nursing home deaths in his state, and is currently under investigation for that. So my take is that the citizens of Florida see what their government is doing and is not listening to the outside chatter. They're basically ignoring the experts in DC. And as a result, the establishment no longer tries to fearmonger the Floridians, because they've seen firsthand how it can work successfully. Florida and other states have remained open for business. And all my friends that live there don't even really talk about COVID anymore. It's pretty much life as usual down there. Now, there are places that still require masks, and it's about 50-50 people wearing them versus not, but the cities are not collecting fines on those who don't. Florida has very similar numbers to states like California and New York, who I feel have really done damage to their economies with their lockdown rules, especially here in San Diego where I live. My question is, if being open for business as opposed to suffering crippling lockdowns gets you the almost identical COVID case death numbers, then why would you ever want to put yourself through a complete lockdown like New York and California, as examples have done? And I don't know the answer to that, and only time is going to tell who is going to be more successful or not. But I go back to my initial statement about there needs to be a level of fear in order to get things accomplished. What I did, I went onto the CDC website and just looked at some numbers recently. And as of March 8th, I just took a look at the 4 states, California, Florida, New York, and Texas. And I just primarily looked at COVID case counts per 100,000 population, and then COVID death counts per 100,000 population. And so what I did was I just divided those numbers, the deaths for the number of cases per 1,000 population. What I came up with was for California, that number was 1.5%. For Florida, that number was 1.65%. For New York, and New York is interesting because they actually separate out New York City from the rest of the state. But the rest of the state, that number was 1.9%. And in New York City, I believe that number was even higher than that. And then in Texas, it was similar to Florida at 1.65%. So what that says to me was California, complete lockdown of their economy. Who knows what the long-term damage is going to be to the economy and to the citizens of the state, to the mental health of the citizens of the state. Compare that number to Florida, which is generally back to normal, business as usual, with only a 0.5% increase in that number. Is it worth it? Is it going to be worth it? My personal opinion is I don't think it is, but only time will tell, like I said. So the CDC also released a report on March 5th admitting that the mask mandates decreased COVID case growth by less than 2% over a 100-day period. And according to this report, mask mandates stopped case growth by 0.5% after 20 days and less than 2% after 100 days. Basically, what that's telling me is that the masks really aren't doing that much to help solve the problem or help keep people safe. Yet still the mask mandate is being advised, and some states like California included are actually trying to mandate 2 masks being mandatory. And you're seeing that now with Joe Biden. He's out whenever he's out in public, he's got 2 masks on. So now you get the CDC recently loosening up some of the restrictions on people who've had both vaccine shots, and I think that's great. However, there's some confusion there as well because I've got a friend who works at one of the military bases here in California, and there's a government document out that's circulating around that's kind of stating almost the exact opposite of what people should be doing when they have both vaccines. So there's definitely a level of confusion there. And it's to the point where even CNN's medical analyst, ER physician, and former Baltimore Health Commissioner Dr. Lena Wen criticized the CDC's guidelines on what fully vaccinated people can do and how they should still avoid traveling. Dr. Wen, during Monday's CNN Newsroom show, said that statement was, quote, far overly cautious in a way that defies common sense, and that fully vaccinated individuals should be able to travel and should be encouraged to travel. And finally, a couple of days ago, CNN got berated on social media for their tweet about these new CDC guidelines, and rightfully so in my mind. On March 8th, they tweeted, the CDC releases guidelines giving, quote, limited freedoms to people who've been fully vaccinated. And my take on that is limited freedoms for who? For the people not in Florida who are still listening to the establishment media, Democratic politicians, and unelected bureaucrats? Because the people in Florida and now Texas and 15 other states opening up now don't seem to be listening to those people either. And they all seem to be doing well, and their numbers all seem to be moving in the right direction. So I believe the narrative is to scare people into compliance. And when that curtain is pulled back, like it was in Florida and other states, it exposes the real reason, and that's control of how one lives our lives and where and when we can move around. And a more nefarious reason for this fear campaign and public shaming, in my view, is the need for people to be afraid of some unknown menace or boogeyman. And I believe that's in order to help them pass H.R. 1, which is the voting reform bill, which would make permanent a lot of what went on in this last election and the highly questionable practices associated with the mail-in voting. Remember, those were all supposed to be emergency policies put in place because of the crisis the country was dealing with. If states are wanting to get back to normal, and without something to keep those citizens inside and away from the polls, say for the 2022 midterms, those practices are no longer needed. I believe that's why you're seeing more and more news stories about virus variants and questions whether the current vaccine will be enough to stop these new variants down the road. Or you see Fauci or other people saying that we won't be fully back to normal until 2022, leaving the door open for another crisis right in time for those midterm elections. Only time will tell if I'm right, and I'll keep a close eye on how the media shifts the narrative as we move down the road. So those are kind of my personal feelings. With normal in-person voting and with established absentee balloting rolls, I believe the outcome of the 2022 midterms is going to look very different than what we just witnessed. So anyway, that's I just wanted to kind of give my take on the establishment's reaction to these 16 states recently announcing that they want to remove the mask mandate and try to get their states back to normal. So hopefully this makes you think a little bit. Hopefully it gets a conversation going, and we'll see how it goes down the road. But in the meantime, this is the Rain Man. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching Rain Man's Take, Observations on the World We Live In. If you like the content, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. You can also follow Rain Man's Take on Instagram at Rain Man's Take. Also, check out our website at www.rainmanstakepodcast.com and send your comments to rainmanstake@gmail.com. Keep an eye out for future podcasts, which will be coming out every Thursday at 5 p.m. West Coast time.